Welcome back to part 2 of our lesson. In part 1, we defined what we mean by a problem. It's an open question or ongoing conversation in the discourse community. And if we're going to research that social problem, we need to use the critical thinking skills of inference, that is, moving from the larger to the smaller, and generalization, moving from the smaller to the more broad. Now we're going to take a moment to do a couple of examples of how we can think about finding a social conversation. Some of you will already know exactly what social conversation you want to engage. Others of you may need to start your research in order to understand what social conversations are happening around the discourse community you chose. And we're going to assume that that's the case with both of our examples. So again, remember we had two basic models. In the first, we say, here's an open question or social conversation in my discourse community, and I think the genre that I studied plays a role in answering that question or solving that problem. We're going to start with an example of this. And our example for this is going to be the Pikes Peak Humane Society. We started this example on Wednesday. So let's imagine that your discourse community was the Pikes Peak Humane Society, and that the genre you studied are the pet adoption pages. We know, because it's pretty obvious, that the goal of the pet adoption pages is to make these pets look sweet, look at those kitty cats, and desirable so that someone will select them. But there are a lot of ways that we could do that, and the Pikes Peak Humane Society does that in a really interesting way. To get a sense of how they do that, we're going to start by looking at Mac, who's given us some serious side-eye over here. We know that Mac is a Boston Terrier and Pug, that he's neutered, that he's 2 years old, 2.5 years old, and 24 pounds. But notice that we have the chance to get to know Mac, and it's framed as get to know me. And here's what we learn about Mac when we click in. Take a look at this get to know me description. It's in the first person, and it's trying to capture the high energy nature of this dog. Notice all of the asterisks. I have lots of energy! I need daily exercise! Mac is a high energy guy who needs training classes. And he needs a home where children will respect his space. So he probably needs a home that doesn't have little kids. Now, Mac, like I said, given us side-eye and on a short leash because Mac's a high-energy guy. But if Mac sounds like the challenge you want, and you get a kick out of that personality, Mac might be your guy. This is not just an emotional appeal. There's also a logical appeal playing a role here too. In contrast, I'd like us to go find Lightning. So I'm just going to scroll through real quick so you can see Sparkles and Face and America. We're going to find, there she is. We're going to find Lightning. A family has signed up to adopt Lightning, so let's get to know her. Look at that good girl. Here's what we learn about Lightning. Lightning chases cars. I'm Lightning, the playful superhero of the shelter. My life was different before, filled with car chases and adventure. One day I chased a car, not just any car, but the evil Dr. Exhaust's car. I was determined to stop his harmful emissions. I leapt, nipped at his tires, and he swerved into a trap I had set. The authorities arrived, and I was brought here to this shelter. I'm a bit nervous around other dogs. They don't understand my superhero ways. But I'm energetic, always ready for a new adventure. I'm Lightning, your playful superhero, ready to bring fun and excitement into your life. reading between the lines, Lightning either escaped from a home that didn't try to find her, or Lightning was a stray. And now somebody needs to bring her in. Someone needs to teach her how to be a family dog. And someone has signed up to do that. Again, it's important for us to realize that there are challenges that come with this dog. And so this is not just creating an emotional appeal, though that is certainly a part of it. It's also asking us to be really thoughtful about whether or not we, as people who love her face, can also give Lightning the home she needs. Now, there may be a lot of conversations about animal shelters that are happening in the public, in newspapers and magazines, but there's also a lot going on in scholarship. And if I want to know what scholars are saying, what's the ongoing academic conversation about this topic, come over here. I, as a researcher, almost always start my work with Google Scholar. And so I'm just going to put in animal shelters. There we go. And I'm going to start looking through the sources that appear under animal shelters. Okay? And I'm going to start noticing that there are patterns here. There are articles about euthanasia of animals in shelters. There are articles about pet selection preferences in shelters. How do people choose what animal they want? There are articles about, how dogs behave in animal shelters. Interesting. So one of the things that I'm going to ask you to do is set a timer for about 10 minutes and just look through these pages. Take in what people are talking about. Here's more about euthanasia. Oh, managing staff reaction. That's interesting, but that's probably outside of the scope of what we're talking about because that's not really a part of our genre. I'm going to go over here. Again, how we select an animal. Ooh, risk factors for relinquishing, increasing adoption rates. Interesting. Okay. More about how animals behave while they're in the shelters. Now up to page 4. Just again, looking through adoption and relinquishment. Why do people bring those back? I know that was a big problem after COVID. There's some medical stuff, but that again, that's outside of the scope of what I'm trying to do. Socializing the animals in the shelters. Okay, so I've got some ideas, right? And once I have some ideas, I can come back and I can start to frame up a problem and begin to move towards a research question. So I can say, okay, look, what I see out there is that there's a need and there's a conversation about how to get dogs adopted so that they have better life outcomes. So my question could be, how can shelters improve adoption rates to ensure a higher quality of life for dogs? We can use that secondary research that we just saw to start establishing the problems that arise when dogs stay in shelters too long, or even when dogs get relinquished to shelters. So this may include, but is not limited to, euthanasia. And this is where we bring our second paper in and we begin to build it into the work we're doing now and build around it. We can say that these ads for the pets who are currently in the shelter play a valuable role because they not only establish that emotional connection, but they also encourage logical decision making so that we don't have dogs coming back to the shelter over and over again. We can also see that there is actually secondary research about this move that the Pikes Peak Humane Society did, creating a voice to tell you about the dog's personality. Nicola Taylor from Central Queensland University in Australia actually wrote an article called Never and It, Intersubjectivity and the Creation of Animal Personhood in Animal Shelters. And that is just what's happening in those adoption pages. Those animals are getting turned into people that we can relate to and think about how we want to interact with. I've only got about 5 minutes left on my recording, so let's go take a look at our second example, where we're going to think about the other direction, where we say the genre I study demonstrates that there is an open question or social conversation in my discourse community. So this one starts with that second essay and says, what does this tell me? What social problems does this point to that I can start thinking about? For this one, I'd like us to return to USAPA, and in particular, I want us to think about those cadet videos that we watched at the beginning of our genre unit. Remember these? I'm not going to hit play on them, but these are the videos that I'm talking about. You may remember that we worked with them in class. So one of the things that we talked about in class as we watched these videos was the fact that one of the big appeals of these videos in recruiting people to USAPA is that they provide a model of what it means to be disciplined. And if you're a parent, you probably think that discipline is pretty good for your kid. And so you watch this video in a recruiting context and you go, oh, awesome. My kid is gonna learn, and here's a military phrase you know, good order and discipline. Good order and discipline. So what happens if we jump back out to Google Scholar and put in a phrase like military academies and standards of discipline? Well, notice that we're going to start to see things coming up like military order and discipline. This comes from a military history journal in 2010. Oh, in 2017, someone is asking, whatever happened to military good order and discipline? So this means that this writer thinks that military good order and discipline is disappearing. We have things about discipline versus justice, how to strengthen, oh, this is interesting, strengthening military discipline and fostering a healthy atmosphere. So does military discipline have to get in the way of a good atmosphere? We can also go out to popular sources, such as Google, and ask a question like, is the military getting less disciplined? And we're going to find out that even people at Army University Press are talking about this topic. So if this is where we want to go, then we can find that what started off as these pretty straightforward videos actually point to a more significant conversation taking place about valuing and maintaining discipline standards in the military. We find that military members are thinking about the value and definition of good order and discipline, and that scholars are asking, what exactly does that mean? So we could start with those videos and then build out from there, thinking about what those tell us about the nature of good order and discipline and what other people are thinking about how that's playing out in the contemporary military and what that idea actually means for those of you who are entering the military in 2023-24. So what I'd like you to do is take an extra 25 minutes, okay? You're going to spend 10 minutes searching around in Google Scholar and on the internet to get a sense of what people are saying. Then you're going to spend 15 minutes free writing. Don't forget to save any sources you think may be relevant. I'm going to have you email those to me by the beginning of Tuesday's class.